Uh-oh. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Helping folks in Silicon Valley achieve their real estate dreams. If you're interested in buying, selling, or investing in real estate, please feel free to reach out. You can find me at soldbyrobert.com. We've got an interesting show for everyone today. We are going to be interviewing Michael Hellickson, founder and CEO of ClubWealth. Now, that is a group that caters very much towards real estate folks, so it's very much focused on agent things. But I wanted to talk to Michael about buyer, seller, and investor things. I wasn't so we had that chat, and I think you'll agree that we covered some interesting topics. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump in, and we will kick things off. Here is the interview with Michael Hellickson. Enjoy. All right, so with us today, I have Michael Hellickson, and some of you may know his name because he is not a shrinking violet in the world of real estate. Michael is the founder and president, CEO of ClubWealth, which is a coaching and consulting firm for real estate agents who want to do better in their business and grow. But he's also a top 1% agent, a topic I know we've talked about on the show before. But in terms of just having 20 years of experience doing the job and getting things done. And just before we started recording, I did have a conversation with him about my whole top 1% feeling. So we'll probably let him chime in on that, just because we like to keep it real here and we like to talk about real things. But I'd love to hear from the man himself. If you want to give us a quick rundown on your entry into real estate and what got you here and what kept you here.
I know, I appreciate that a lot. And first of all, thank you for having me. And I appreciate you guys listening in, and hopefully we can bring you a ton of value today that you'll walk away thinking, man, I am glad I listened to that today.
Yeah.
Just by way of credibility, for starters. Yeah. We talk about top 1%. I actually, if you look at by transactional count, I was actually the number one real estate agent. Well, we know for sure in the United States, and we're pretty confident on the planet, for quite a while. And, just heck, even over a decade, almost decade and a half ago, we were doing 120 to 180 transactions a month and had 750 listings in active and pending status at one time. And if you're in real estate, those numbers mean a lot. That you look at those and you'd be like, wow, they were doing a ton of freaking business.
Yeah.
But if you're not in real estate, to Robert's point, we were talking about, well, what about the average sales price to list price? And how do your sales compare to the marketplace? Are you getting sellers more money than the typical agent in the marketplace? And our average was about 105% of list price. We're in the earlier years, we were about 103.5%, and we eventually got to about 105% of list price as we really dialed it in. And as we were doing more short sales, that had a big impact on that number as well.
Yeah.
My son today, so he's 20 years old. He's killing it, actually. It's insane how well he's doing, how fast, but he's at 108% of list price. Which I think current market statistics, or current market status kind of impacts that as well, or market conditions impacts that as well. But in terms of, how I started selling real estate and all that kind of stuff, if that's what you were looking for, then ultimately I started selling when I was in high school back in 1991. So this is my 31st or 32nd year in the industry.
So how old were you when you started?
I was 18. I was in high school.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah. The first sale I ever had was one of my teachers. She listed her house with me and I sold it. It was great. She was happy. I was certainly happy. I was actually the top agent in my office. I was the top listing agent in my office before I graduated high school, which pissed a lot of people off. It was really, it's quite interesting. It's everybody's on your side. Everybody wants you to succeed until you do.
Yeah.
Right. And then all of a sudden, when you succeed, they're like, well, wait a minute. Now, how come he's having all this success and I'm not? And then they get frustrated and they try and drag you back down. But
yeah, I didn't hit it quite as young as you. I was the youngest guy in the office when I joined, but I was in my last year of college, I guess, when I jumped in. So I would have been about 4 years older than you. But yeah, 18. That's
even
amazing.
still, that's fantastic. I love young people getting into the business. Love it. I mean, I look at Austin's team. He's 20 years old, right? And he in the last 8 days, he's listed 7 homes just in the last 8 days. He's 20 years old. He's got an 18-year-old on his team. He's got a 21-year-old on his team that's doing very well. He's got a 24-year-old on his team that's crushing it. Actually, he's a listing agent also, doing very well. I think the oldest person on his team that's not in an administrative position is like 30 years old. So I love seeing these young people. And don't get me wrong, there's the number one agent in the country started when he was 72. So age is not a factor. I guess that's really the message, is that I don't care how old somebody is. If they're going to work their tail off and they're halfway intelligent, they can do very well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and you'd like to. It's an unfortunate reality, though, that I have found some of the best agents I've ever encountered really stink at the self-promotion side of things, right? So they're great agents and they're great at the job of that, but they're not good on the entrepreneurial self-promotion, realizing that you're running your own business part of it, which is a shame.
Well, it's a different dynamic. And serving and acquiring business are two very different dynamics.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, I always like to say Mother Teresa would have made a terrible real estate agent, right? Not because she wouldn't serve at a high level, because she would. She'd serve people at the highest level humanly possible, right? The problem is somebody's got to do the client acquisition for her, because she's not very good. I mean, not everybody out there is a leper looking to sell their house, right? I mean, at the end of the day, somebody's got to bring that business in and somebody's got to take really good care of it.
But I think we also need to not sell Mother Teresa short. She was savage by all accounts. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure she would have let anything stand in her way one way or the other when she put her mind to it.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah. So this is, it's the whole behind the scenes inside baseball stuff is great, but I love to keep it focused on my buyers, sellers, and potentially investors. I actually think everyone who buys real estate should put on their investor hat before
100%.
They sign anything. Just even if they just want to plan to sell their home in 10 years, if you have your investor's hat on, I think you're making better choices. But
can I jump on that real quick, Robert?
Yeah, sure.
I want to piggyback on that. For everybody listening today, whether you're a buyer, a seller, a real estate agent, anybody, doesn't matter. Every single person watching this today, if you want to build wealth in America today, guess what you need to do? You need to invest in real estate. Yeah. It is the one thing guaranteed to keep pace with and generally outperform inflation. It's not only is it a hedge against inflation, it's the easiest way to leverage your investment to make more. You get tax benefits. There's so many ways you make money investing in real estate. I would suggest that if you could set it as a goal to buy one property, even if it was just every 3 years, if you want to retire wealthy, buy one property every 3 years. Now, if you want to really go big, buy one each year. Yeah. But everybody's capable of doing that with the lending the way it is today and the economy the way it is today. It's possible for everybody in America. And I'll tell you, with the hedge funds getting into purchasing real estate, I mean, I think 25% of all the sales that have happened in the last 12 months have been Wall Street and other investors that own already 10 or more properties bought 25% of all the transactions last year. Yeah. That's a substantial number. And what's happening is real estate shifting. It's still a great opportunity, but in 10 years, it's going to be much harder for the average American to get into a home.
Yeah. And on that subject, I mean, this is actually, I've been working out what my next podcast was going to be down the line. Mm-hmm. And what's going on right now with these companies that are doing this level of investing, it's starting to feel an awful lot like the securitization of loans that was happening in the early 2000s, where now you've got people's pension funds that are investing in these things that are fully vested in buying all this real estate. So if those things take a hit in some way, you start to see the building blocks of a very similar occurrence to what happened in 2006, 7, and 8. So on that subject, one of the areas where I know you're an expert is short sales. And in terms of, and obviously we can cover as many things as you can in the time you've got for us, but with the benefit of believing it will come rather than we're already here and we're on fire, what would be some prep things you would say for a person who's in a home who's worried that, hey, my life may be impacted, I may have to do a short sale? What are things you can prepare today to either completely dodge being in a short sale or to prepare as an investor for an upcoming surge in short sales?
Well, let's look at the reality of the marketplace right now, right? Canada is down 20% in the last 60 days. 20% average sales price is down 20% in the last 60 days in Canada.
Yeah.
US, when everybody wants to say, oh, everything's rosy, we're not going to see a big foreclosure boom, all that kind of stuff. Whether we do or not, it's irrelevant, right? We can't control that. So all we can do is control the controllables. And so what we have to do as homeowners, and if we're talking specifically to homeowners right now, what I have to do as a homeowner is I have to understand what this looks like long term. See, the problem is the people that get bit are the people that have a short-term hardship that then causes them not to be able to make their mortgage payment. Now, if the market has adjusted in the short term, which by the way, 20% of every home in America had a price reduction in the last 60 days. If it's on the market, 20% of all listings in America reduced their price in the last 60 days. That's substantial. That's something we haven't seen in 5 years. I mean, and that's a massive, and by the way, in terms of the size of that number, it's something we haven't seen since 2007 and 8. And so, I mean, we're talking massive numbers here.
We're seeing that here too, right in Silicon Valley.
Oh yeah. Oh, Silicon Valley is going to get hit big time. There's no, and California is always a roller coaster. And California is one of the first to get hit, by the way. In fact, I'll tell you, San Diego's numbers, I just happen to know them off the top of my head. San Diego in the last 60 days had a 36% increase in inventory and a 6% decrease in demand. Now that may not sound super substantial, but that is massive.
Yeah.
That is
May to May in
shift.
Silicon Valley, 24% increase in inventory.
Dude, I mean, that's huge. It's huge. Those are big
The
numbers.
national average is an 11% increase. So
I'm telling you guys,
as you say, we're leading the not good run.
Well, but here's the thing. And so here's what you guys, like, I'm buying investment properties right now. Like I've got 5 that I've got under contract literally right now today. This month, we're hoping to close on 5 more.
Yeah.
I know I'm probably buying at the peak of the market, but I'm not buying short term. I don't flip properties. I buy and hold long term. Furthermore, I'm not banking on appreciation. I'm getting it for cash flow. I buy my properties for cash flow and only for cash flow. If it's not going to cash flow, I don't buy it. When's the last time rents went down?
Yeah.
Anywhere.
But let's pause right there for a second, because I think that's a crucial one, right? So you're in contract, 5 different properties. It's a math problem at that point. It is not I love the color or whatever. It is.
I haven't even seen them.
Yeah, that's a little nuts to me. But
no, I've got them in Chicago. I've got them in Florida. I've got Kentucky. I've got Wisconsin. I've got them all over the country. And I don't see any of these things. There's people for that. I got inspectors for that. I got agents for that. I got people that take care of all that for me.
So what are you doing in terms of the math? On the math side, I like to encourage my investor clients to, if they're worried about the future, just say, well, I won't buy a home unless it's got this amount of buffer on my profit and loss. Right.
For me, it's very simple. For me, number one, it's got to conform to several things. One, it's got to conform to the 1% rule. If I buy for $500,000, I got to get $5,000 a month in rent. Now, after putting 20% down, I got to know with a 20% down investment that I've got a 25% margin from payment to rent. And as long as those numbers match up, I'm good. I'm solid. And I can choose. Now I can increase my margins if I go on a 30, or I can decrease my margins if I go on a 15. But and that's a very personal thing, whether you buy on a 15-year mortgage or a 30-year mortgage. I'm 49 years old, so I'd like some properties paid off by the time I'm 65. But the reality is, if I'm really going to aggressively grow a portfolio, I'm better off going with 30s, because in that same amount of time, in the 15 years it'll take for me to get that thing paid off, in that same amount of time, if I take that extra cash flow that I'd get by being on a 30, I can actually go out and buy anywhere from 4 to 7 more homes with that one house than if I simply put it on a 15-year mortgage and tried to get that thing, or sought to pay that off in 15 years.
Yeah.
So and then my net result is my net cash flow 15 years from today, if I have continued to take all of my positive net monthly cash flow from those properties, reinvest them into buying more properties, I actually am many times better off in 15 years in terms of net positive cash flow, because I'm now getting cash flow on somewhere between 4 and 7 properties versus one that's paid off.
And do you focus mostly right now on multifamilies or single families?
I'm buying primarily single family. I can get better returns right now in single family.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because I think from a desirability standpoint, if you're trying to leverage yourself into a market where which home is going to rent first, is it the 2-bedroom, 2-bath, single family residence home, or is it the duplex, tri, or quad? And in terms of, when I was in college, I lived in rental spaces, and I sure as heck would pick a house over
Sure.
having neighbors right on top of me. So, whenever we have those conversations, I know there's an awful lot of folks who push the multifamily, and I'm a multifamily fan, but
I like multi. I mean, look at Grant Cardone.
Yeah.
He's done well with it.
yeah, no, it's absolutely a great way to go. But
Sure.
in terms of creating a bulletproof portfolio for future stuff, people are always going to want to go to your house first. So if the market got super nuts in the rental world, and it didn't during the last downturn, right? Rents didn't really go down in the last downturn.
No.
They stuck for a while, but
then they went up
And then they went up dramatically
before prices went up.
Yeah, and in fact, over the last 3 years, they've outpaced the appreciation of homes, which has been ridiculous. But in any event, it's one of those deals where I'd much rather have a more desirable home, so I could charge the same rent as that guy doing a triplex, but at least I get the rent as opposed to the other guy getting the rent. If that, or even charge $10 more or $50 more or whatever it is, and know my assets are going to be coming in. So I just thought I'd see if you have. So do you have a diversified portfolio at all? Or are you all in for single family residential?
I've got I own a couple of commercial buildings that my businesses operate out of. We've got our single family. We don't have a lot of multifamily right now. We have in the past. We probably will again in the future. But right now we're pretty focused on, because I can get really good returns. My cash on cash return, my ROI, my net ROI are better on single family. And if you look at Wall Street, what is Wall Street buying right now? Wall Street's buying single family, right? I mean, that's and they are now taking such a stake in. I mean, they're buying literally thousands and thousands and thousands of homes every single month across the country, which some would argue, especially if that's 25% of the marketplace, that's having an impact on the longevity of this bull run. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the coming years. Now, and I'm not saying this, but there are those conspiracy theorists out there that would suggest that, hey, part of the reason why interest rates are going up is because the powerful few want to outprice the mom and pop and make it so that the hedge funds can go in and buy these things. They're paying cash for them, right? Yeah. And so the hedge funds can go in and buy up those properties. Doesn't matter what interest rates do, but they want to get those properties while prices are still relatively affordable.
Yeah.
So who knows what's going to happen in the next 5 years, but that's not what matters. What matters is, what do we need to do, right?
Right.
We can't, none of us has a crystal ball, but I'll tell you that in the last 30 plus years of doing this, I've been very fortunate. Every time we've gone through these different cycles, I've been very fortunate to come out on the top end of these cycles. And the number one reason I believe, there's really two things that I subscribe to. One is control the controllables. So I'm only worried about what I can personally control. And then number two is, where there's chaos, there's opportunity. Yeah. So when the chaos comes, you got to be ready for and be looking for, what is the opportunity in the chaos? Don't panic like everybody else. Like Warren Buffett says, right? When everybody else is bearish, I'm bullish. When everybody else is bullish, I'm bearish. Yeah. Right? And so if short sales come back, and here's the reality of the situation. Some are saying, well, we may see appreciation. Who knows? At some point, whether it's this year, next year, 10 years from now, somewhere down the line, there's going to be a major price adjustment. Much like in Canada is experiencing right this minute.
Yeah.
When that happens, if I bought my home today and a year from now, I want to sell my home, I've got roughly 8 to 10% cost in selling. So if it did not appreciate at least 8 to 10%, I'm a short sale. Because at the end of the day, I owe more money on my house than I can sell it for and pay everybody.
Yeah.
And so if that happens, how do I deal with that? That's the big question. Or you asked the question earlier, how do I prevent myself from being in that position ever?
Yeah.
And there's only one sure way to do that. Can you guess what that is?
Well, I would guess just having enough cash to weather a period of time, which has kind of always been my mantra for my buyers that are way overextending themselves. You're better off buying a little less house and have a little more cash, perhaps, if some bad thing is going to happen. So
you are 100% on the right track. So we have to learn to live on less than we make. So I would recommend a book to everybody. It's an old book. It's a great, it's the Bible of money, in my opinion, and it's called The Richest Man in Babylon. And I'd recommend that everybody read that book. And what you've got to do is you've got to learn to live on less than you make. I mean, because the reality is, you know, there was a period of time in your life where you said to yourself, man, if I just made what you're now making today, if I just made that amount of money, man, I'd be in great shape.
Yeah.
And yet here we all are, we're making that amount of money. And guess what's happened? Our lifestyle has increased to match our income. And that amount of money is no longer the goal. Now we've got a bigger goal because we want to be able to expand our lifestyle.
Yeah.
Well, the key is reduce the lifestyle, right? Simplify the lifestyle, get rid of unnecessary expenses. Things like lattes, you know, $4 or $5 a latte. Right? I don't even know what a latte costs nowadays. I don't drink coffee.
$5.90.
Okay, so there you go. So let's just say even just $5.
As a former
right?
Starbucks addict.
Well, there you go. Okay, so let's just say, let's just take $5.90 times 5 a week. That's 29 a week times 52 weeks a year. That's $1,534 right there.
Yeah.
So now if I could take that $1,534 and I could find other things like that, and instead of spending it there, if I would set that money aside and I'd go out and I'd develop, number one, write this down, I need to have 6 to 12 months worth of expenses in the bank.
Yeah.
And so if I can get to my 6 to 12 months worth of expenses in the bank, hallelujah, I'm good, right? Like I'm not stressed out. I can live a very relatively stress-free life, at least in terms of finances. Next, I want to start setting some money aside to buy investment properties. Now, this is presuming that I've already paid off my debt, right? I don't have consumer debt and that sort of thing.
Right.
But I want to set, if I do have some consumer debt, I still need to set some money aside for investing while I'm paying that debt off. But I would suggest be aggressive on getting debt free, set some money aside and start investing in real estate while living on less than you make. And guess what? You don't need to worry about being a short sale.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And it's, you know, people don't realize how much just a little preparation today, to your point of even just starting to put aside some amount of money. And my encouragement to my clients when I talk to them, it's a little bit, sometimes it's super encouraging because I'll talk to someone who's right on the ball there. You know, well, you know, I take X amount and I put it in the bank every month. And if I can't do that, I don't do whatever's preventing me from doing that. And then you get other folks who just sort of live paycheck to paycheck. And when I help those folks get into a house, one of my first bits of advice is you need to start banking some money. Not just because of your house, but because if you want to make sure and keep this house, if something bad happens, you want to have enough money to hold on to it. It doesn't always make me the most popular guy in the room to have that conversation with someone as they're trying to buy a house. But I feel like you kind of have if I owe someone a fiduciary duty, it extends to the repercussions of potentially buying this house.
That's
and
right.
The thing was the number of, and that, you know, in terms of my business, the repeat business I got, so many were people I told in the early 2000s, don't do this. Don't get this 110% loan. I really don't think this is a good idea. I had some who took my advice and some who didn't, but boy, the ones who didn't take my advice sure did remember my name and came back and said, boy, do we wish we'd listened to you. How can you help us now? Kind of a thing. And it just takes that little ounce of prevention, that little ounce of forethought to believe, you know, on an infinite timeline, all things are possible. And even in just a relatively short timeline, bad things are still possible. And if you're not getting a raise of over 7% every year, you're not beating inflation. You're losing money every year. So you need to start saving some of that cash for future stuff.
100%.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned, you know, you talk about people that have come back into your life or if, you know, that you've given advice to in years past. I had one recently. I was at the Pike Place Market in Seattle, Washington. Mm-hmm. And I was hosting some clients there that, you know, we were taking them around the market and had a little mastermind going with some of our real estate agent clients. And as we were doing this, we were at the gum wall. I don't know if you've ever been to the Pike Place Market, but there's this wall where everybody sticks their, it's really gross. It's nasty.
Yeah.
We're standing there. We're all doing our little thing at the gum wall. It's a tradition in Seattle. And this guy walks up to me and he looked familiar, but I didn't recognize him. I couldn't remember exactly who he was at first because his appearance had changed a little bit. You know, he had facial hair he didn't have before or vice versa. And anyway, long story short, he says, Michael. I'm like, hey, hi, how are you? He's like, Michael, I don't know if you remember me, but my name's Derek. And dude, let me just tell you, like, you changed my life. And my clients are all standing around, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't remember who this guy is. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do here? And he says, Michael, you changed my life. He says, you got me living on less than I made. You got me setting money aside, and you got me investing in real estate. And here we are. And it's been about 20 years since I helped him start doing that. That's how ClubWealth started. We helped mom and pop learn how to invest in real estate. Right. And he says, today I've got a whole bunch of properties paid off, and I'm here with my 2 kids, and I don't have to work. I get to be with my family. I get to enjoy my life because I lived on less than I made 20 years ago. And today I can do whatever I want to do. Man, and then it all came back to me, and it flooded back. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know who this is now. I remember Derek, and it just, but I didn't even know how to respond. Like I was so struck by what he had to say. And you know, you talked a minute ago about how you can accomplish anything given enough time. And I think people vastly overestimate what they can do in the short term and vastly underestimate what they can do in the long term.
Yeah.
But it starts with, I've got to be willing to make short-term sacrifices. And short-term is 5 years. Let's just say 5 years. If we could get everyone that's watching this right now to just say, okay, I'm going to cut back in every area I can for 5 years, and I'm going to work extra. I'm going to put the extra time in at work. I'm going to work overtime. I'm going to get a second job. I'm going to create a side business, a side hustle, something. I'm going to do something to create some additional revenue so that during this next 5 years, I can start buying investment properties and real estate. It will not take you long at all before you'll have more coming in passive income than it takes to pay your bills every month.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you're out of the rat race. You can retire.
Yeah.
And then now you've got your time back. Now you can take that time and you can magnify that time even further to go out and do more of that investing that creates that passive cash flow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's recognizing that you're not powerless, right? There are so many systems in place, it seems like, to convince you that all of your success, everything that you get in life, needs to come from somewhere else. And the reality is that that's not it. And nobody who's truly, quote unquote, successful, however you define it, that's not how they got it. They didn't get it by working for some gigantic Fortune 500 company, or unless you started with Apple in 1991. That's the exception. That stock went crazy. But anyway, and as someone who worked for Apple for a couple of years and got some stock, I'm pretty happy about that.
Or
but anyway,
Microsoft, they did well too. But,
or Microsoft,
and
sure.
There's those companies. But to your point, go ahead. Yeah, you're right.
Well, no, I'm just the point is that nobody need it. The success is your own creation, right? And being and understanding, A, you can own it, and B, no one else is going to stop you, no matter what peddler of depression is out there spewing this idea that someone's keeping you down. There aren't enough of them to actually do it. There may be someone out there who hates your guts and doesn't want you to succeed. Guess what? The best revenge is showing them how great you're going to succeed by devoting some time and effort into whatever it is that you love or enjoy, or whatever gives you some satisfaction that's going to make you some additional money. So,
man, I embrace the haters. They fuel me 100%.
Oh yeah.
I love it. And, but to your point, motivation's got to come from within, and everybody's got an excuse. There's always an excuse. Oh, I'm too tired. I got to work too late. I'm too broke. I'm too whatever. The reality is, I was one of my mentors is a guy named Jim Rohn, a wonderful guy. And as I was listening to something of Jim Rohn's recently, and he was talking about this guy that had a gold mine, and he says, "Hey, man, I've got this gold mine. I got this more gold than I know what to do with, and I just don't have time to harvest it all myself." He said, he wants to share it with his friend, so he calls his friend up and he says, "Hey, friend, come on over and dig yourself some gold out of my gold mine here." And the friend says, but I don't have a shovel. And he says, well, go get you one. And the friend says, "Man, do you know what they're charging for shovels nowadays?"
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, you've got to get out of your own way. At some point in time, you've got to decide that you're going to take control of your life, take control of your future, and make a decision to move forward. Because if you don't, nobody's going to do it for you. Nobody's going to show up and say, "Hey, here's a whole bunch of money. Good luck."
Yeah.
And if they do, don't take it. That's the worst thing you have to. It's funny. Bill Gates, we're talking about computers, billionaires. Bill Gates was asked in an interview decades ago from this young lady. She says, well, Bill, how did you succeed? And Bill pulls out his checkbook and he writes her name on a check, signs the check, tears the check out, hands it to her, gives her the pen, says, fill in the amount. She said, oh no, I couldn't possibly do that. So she pushes the check back to Bill, and Bill says, no, really, fill in whatever amount you want. Oh, no, I couldn't possibly do that. And she pushes it back to Bill, and Bill looks at her and he says, as he's putting the check back in his pocket, he says, the secret to my success is I never miss an opportunity.
Yeah.
And how many people right now watching your call right now, how many people watching this podcast would say to themselves, I wish I would have bought a rental property 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I was in my 20s, whenever.
Everybody was telling you real estate will never come back, right? Because on the flip side of that whole, people who will discourage your success or tell you need it to come from somewhere else, there's going to be people out there that want to help nurture your success, but nobody cares as much about your success as you do, right? I mean, even you as the guy who contributes to people being successful, you're offering people tools, advice, processes, but the bottom line is that individual who's receiving that needs to care the most, because they need to implement it. And
if I want you to be successful more than you want to be successful, we both have a problem.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And we also have someone who's likely going to be on welfare in the short term. So I mean, that's not a viable option, I think, for most folks.
Dude, I don't know if you can tell already, but I'm a hand up, not a handout kind of guy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And it's the classic, right? It's do you give the guy a fish or do you teach him to fish kind of a thing? Yeah. And at that point, it becomes, how good of a fisherman are you? You know, how far do you take your skills? Do you figure out the best parts of the stream to drop your lure? What's your bait? The things that you figure out because you're doing it. We've kind of descended into this rah-rah place that I think is important. But in terms of, and we've talked about responsible, borrowing and responsible spending and living within your means, below your means, so that you can save. What other kinds of advice would you give, given what the market's doing right now? What advice would you throw out there that we haven't talked about yet?
Buy for cash flow and forget it. And what I mean by that is, it's like, don't be the day trader of real estate. Those are the ones that are going to get burned. What you need to do is you need to buy and hold long-term, and when you have it, forget it. And don't worry if the price goes down. You only lose if you sell. Yeah. That's why you buy for cash flow. If it's constantly throwing off cash flow every month and the price goes in, let's say I bought the property for $200,000 and I'm getting $500 a month in positive monthly cash flow after I pay my mortgage and all the expenses associated with owning this rental property. I get $500 a month in positive cash flow, but the price drops. All of a sudden the market tanks and the price drops, and now it's only worth $150,000. Well, what do?
You don't sell.
The answer is nothing. You keep it. You keep collecting your $500 a month positive cash flow. And then guess what you do? You go out and you buy another one. Now, instead of paying the two, maybe you're paying $150. Great. That's called dollar cost averaging, right? Worst case scenario, you're leveraging your money. You go out and you buy another one, and eventually it'll go up in value. And that's great if it does. And it's fine if it doesn't, because what will happen is the rent will go up over time. You'll be paying down that mortgage, or better yet, your tenant will be paying down that mortgage. You'll be getting tax deductions. And I got a massive tax deduction this year. Why? Because of all these rental properties. I mean, I'm telling you, it was a massive tax deduction. And you know what I did with that tax deduction? I didn't go on vacation. I didn't go buy a new car. I didn't go buy a bigger house. What'd I do? I went out and bought more rental properties.
Yeah. Someone asked me, I picked up a client once, and it was the weirdest conversation I've had in a long time. I don't drive a Mercedes. I don't drive a Range Rover. I drive a Ford. I've driven the same Ford for 10 years. I take very good care of my car. And someone asked me, well, how come you're not driving around in a Mercedes or a BMW? And I said, because I'd rather invest that money in a house than a car. you know. So well, you know, as if that's some measure. The measure of success for me is smart decisions. So if you're driving around in a $270,000 car, I'm not sure that's a good thing for me in terms of gauging your ability to wisely invest your money. But you know, you hit on a couple of things over this last 30 minutes we've been talking. There's the one reality is, particularly in my area, it's super difficult in the Silicon Valley for someone to jump into investing because the median house price is $1.7 million. So I end up doing very long drives out to the Central Valley to like Fresno and Sacramento and other places where homes are more affordable. But I'm someone who embraces the idea of you don't have to buy in your local area to find the right property. You just need to assemble the right people to guide you through the process in other markets to make wise investments outside of your state.
I live in Seattle.
Internet today, yeah. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And maybe if you're willing to give some inside confidential information, what are communities you think would make great investments anywhere in the country today?
Sure. Okay, well, for starters, you're right. I don't buy in Seattle. I'm not buying, really, I'm not buying anywhere on the West Coast just because the numbers don't work, right? And so where am I buying primarily? I'm buying in the Midwest, buying in the Southwest, I'm buying in the South, places like Tennessee, Florida.
Everyone listening, see, he said Tennessee. Chattanooga, Tennessee's been on my list because a few years back, they did the whole fiber thing and a huge tech influx happened. And I'm like, buy Chattanooga, baby, but right near the river, buy Chattanooga.
Well, if you're looking for a great real estate agent in Chattanooga, one of our top coaching clients is the top agent in Chattanooga.
I seriously would like to get his name and contact info once we're done. So
she will take very good care of you. She's amazing.
Awesome.
So I'll definitely get you their info. But at the end of the day, Tennessee's a great investment. I know my son, he bought his first rental property down in Memphis, and it was a duplex. He's owned it for about a year and a half now, and he's made actually almost 2 years now, I think. And he's made, I think, a $70,000 profit on appreciation, not to mention the cash flow he's had during that period of time, the tax deductions he's enjoyed. And he's just now getting ready to do a 1031 on that one, so he can roll that $70,000 into a bigger, better property that he can now get greater appreciation and greater cash flow on. But I mean, that's a great example. Or, Florida, pretty much all over Florida has been doing really well. We're buying a lot in Chicago. We're buying Wisconsin. We're buying Kentucky.
Are you buying coastal in Florida, or are you going a little bit more inland?
Honestly, I couldn't even tell you. I don't even know where our stuff is in Florida. I want to say Pensacola is one of the places we're buying, but I don't remember where all the places we're buying in Florida are. And by the way, people think, man, how can this guy not know where he's buying? How can this guy not be looking at all these properties? Listen, you've got to get the right people around you, and you got to trust them, who they are. You got to trust them. You got to trust that they know what they're doing. Now, in the beginning, if it's at all humanly possible, I highly recommend buying your investment properties close to where you live, right? If you can make them cash flow, if you can drive to go see it, it's a lot easier to make mistakes when you can drive to go see them than it is to get on a plane. I'm fortunate that I'm in a financial position where I'm free to go invest in all kinds of different markets around the country. And I've got people and resources in those markets that make it easy for me to do so with relative assurity and security that I'm not going to be getting myself into a major problem. And if I do, I've got the people there to take care of it. And so if you don't have that, yes, it's obviously better to invest close to home. But if I'm in Silicon Valley, I mean, and there's this debate about, is your personal residence an investment or not? And the reality is it's an expense, right? I mean, you're paying money every month. You're not making money every month. So it's an expense. Now, if I lived in Silicon Valley, you want to know what I would do? I'd
buy outside of Silicon Valley.
Well, or I'd forego the house and I'd go buy a fourplex. And because I can finance a fourplex as a residential property, and the bank will let me qualify for a lot more on an investment property than it can on a personal property. So let's say I can only afford, a pretty normal little 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in Silicon Valley is probably what, $1 million, $1.5 million, something like that.
About 1.5.
Okay, so let's say it's 1.5. So instead of buying that $1.5 million house that I barely qualify for, I could go out and I could get a loan. I could talk to a lender, and I'll bet I could get a lender to give me a loan for 2.5 to 3.5 on a fourplex, because they're going to credit 75% of the presumed income from that property. They'll do rental research and figure out what they think it's going to get, and they'll give you 75% credit for that plus your income. Now you qualify for more. You live in one of those units and you rent the other 3 out.
Yeah.
That's how you get started.
Yeah.
Now you start doing that and you can start putting money to work for you now. And that would be a much better move than buying across the country to start with.
Yeah.
Because now I can do it in my local market and I can make the numbers work.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of house hacking. I mean, when I talk to even first time buyers who are maybe a little bit hesitant, and you make a really good point, because even your example of saying, if the average house is going for 1.5 million bucks, go to 2.5 and do a duplex. That isn't even the amount you'd have to go to. I mean, you could buy a duplex or a quad in a lot of different communities for only 10%, 20% over what you would buy that single family residential home for. Mm-hmm. So you're in terms of value per housing unit, duplexes and tris and quads are amazing deals, even at the crazy areas in Palo Alto where they're going for 3.5 million, 4 million bucks.
Well, here's what I like about that. I would prefer, if I had a choice between a 2 or a 4plex, right? I would go to the 4plex. Why? Because I spread my risk out over 4 units and I can get into more real estate, right? So again, if I can, and again, you got to look at the numbers. You got to make sure the numbers work, but let's just assume for a moment that my cost to live there is not going to change based on whether I do the duplex or the 4plex. Well, then go for the 4plex, buy as much as you can with as little as possible out of pocket, because instead of I have to pay, 15, 20% on my investment properties that I buy in most parts of the country because of the number of properties I own, because I'm buying them as investment properties. When you buy that 4plex, you can buy it owner occupied because you're going to live in one of the units. Yeah. So now you're 3.5 to 5% down.
Yeah.
I mean, you're saving a ton of money on that down payment, and you can still get cash flow. And if you're buying it right, you're probably paying a lot less to live there than you would to live in that house. And now, instead of gaining appreciation and tax benefits on $1.5 million, maybe you're gaining it on $3-4 million. Man, that's a huge. I mean, think about this. If historically, let's just use 3% as our number, right? If the historic appreciation of the last 100 years, and I think it's more than 3%, but let's just call it 3%.
Yeah.
3%. So $1.5 million. I'm just doing some quick math here. Times 3%. Well, that's $45,000 a year. But watch this. What if I've got a $3 million property? Well, now I've got $90,000 a year coming in on appreciation alone. Yeah. Then you start adding the tax benefits, the fact that my mortgage is now getting paid down on that property. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And it's the one thing that's those units are kind of thin on the ground around here, in terms of particularly attractive quads. I mean, many of the quads I see are just
ghetto.
It's just the problem is so many of them were built so long ago. Nobody builds them anymore around here. But I have several clients just over the last year that did exactly what you're describing, where they still couldn't afford doing right here in the heart of Silicon Valley, but in areas within that 40-minute commute range, we're able to find stuff, and they're still positive cash flow even though they're living in one of the units. So once they move on, and they're planning on doing that in 3 years, they're going to move into they're going to buy another tri or quad or duplex.
Yep.
And then suddenly they'll have positive cash flow of nearly $2,000 a month on that one.
What's
property.
Really nice about that, though, is they can do that every year. One time every year, you can move and buy another owner-occupied property every year. And you think about those guys, right? When they rent that one that they've been living in out,
mm-hmm.
So they're already cash positive on that property. So now they're getting all of the cash flow from unit number 4 that they can now use to save up for the next down payment. Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many ways for them to make money on that.
I had a guy who was just a solo individual, and his way of doing it was he'd go and he'd live in it for a year. Then he'd move out and rent it and live in an RV for a year so that he'd get the cash flow out of that 4th unit. And then he'd buy his next one.
The thing he's got to watch out for on that is the banks would consider that mortgage fraud. So he's got to be pretty careful.
Well, he makes sure to stay in it long enough that he's established that they're beyond that point of fraud. Yeah. He lives there for like a year and a half, 2 years.
Oh, perfect. It is. Yeah. Then he's good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was my advice. I'm like, you can't do this and a month later move out because that's fraud and you'll go to jail and that's not good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, but that's fantastic. If he's living there for at least a year, right? And then he's moving into that RV.
Yeah. He was also a contractor kind of guy. So he'd go in there and he'd fix up the place super nice so he could rent it for the max once he decided to do it.
That's huge.
So, yeah.
Well, that's what you want to look for too, is you want to look for places where you can do a little bit to add a lot of value, right? Can I add carports, for example? It's pretty cheap to add carports, but it can really increase the value of that rental or
turn carports into garages. I had a guy do that and he was able to increase his monthly rent by $150 per unit.
Per unit. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Now you start talking $150 per unit, to us, that might sound like a small number, but man, you start talking $150 times 12, that's $1,800 per year. Well, let's say that's on a 4
times 3 because he did it for 3 units.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So divided by 4, hold on. So that was 1,800 times 3, that's $5,400 per year. Right. And so now if I do that, let's say for 5 years, that brings me to $27,000. That gives me enough for another down payment on another little place that I'm going to go owner occupy.
Yeah.
I mean, and so you really you got to put the mechanics of this to work for you. So everybody that's watching this right now is capable of retiring wealthy in 15 years. Problem is everybody wants to do it in 5.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you're focused on the 5 and you're not worried about the 15, then you'll never get to the 15 the way you want to. So what you've got to do is you got to decide, where's my hard going to be? Is it going to be hard now or hard in 15 years?
Yeah.
Because it's going to, there's going to be a suck somewhere. Is it going to suck now or is it going to suck in 15 years? I'd rather have it suck now, and 15 years from now, I can do whatever the heck I want to do.
Yeah. Always embrace the proximal suck. That is the way to go. Embrace the proximal suck.
I've never heard that before. I love that.
Yeah. It's whatever's the closest suck. Just deal with it and move on. The sooner you start it, the sooner you'll finish it.
Embrace the proximal suck. Dude, I am so using that. I am completely stealing that from you.
Just make sure to keep the reference to where you got it.
I'll give you credit for you for the first couple of times. Then
it'll just be yours. Yeah, okay. I can live with that. All right, where I can see we're creeping up on what you told me was your hard stop. So I don't want to drag you any further than you promised. You've really been generous with your knowledge, and I really appreciate it. If you've got any parting words for the folks, if you've got anything coming up that you'd like people to be aware of, this would be the perfect time to share it.
I've got nothing to sell to mom and pop homeowner out there. If you're a real estate agent, get on clubwealth.com, reach out to us. We'll help you out. We do have a Facebook group for investors. That's not very active, to be honest with you. It's a small group, but I do answer questions in there from time to time. So you can go to, it's ClubWealth Real Estate Investor Group on Facebook. But truth be told, look, here's all I would say. Here's the advice that I would give you guys. Start living on less than you make. Start squirreling away as much as you can every month until you can find a way to get into that duplex, triplex, fourplex that we talked about.
Yeah.
Get into that and continue to live well below your means, and just keep rinsing and repeating that process as often as humanly possible. And over time, you will be surprised at how quickly you'll develop your net worth and you'll have financial freedom that we all crave.
I think that's great advice, and it's like all good advice. You need to take it and you need to run with it. Don't just let it sit there. So everyone out there, I hope that you've gotten something out of today's exchange. I know that given where I think we're heading, maybe it's just a degree of severity. Embracing that philosophy, I think, is going to go a long way towards making it a blip in your life rather than a cliff that you have to navigate. So thanks again to Michael for sharing so much of his time with us. He's been super generous. Thanks again for visiting. And at some point in the future, I'd love to talk to you again.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot, Robert.
You bet.
All right, folks. I hope, as always, we have left more value on the table
than we have taken up in your time. That's always the goal here. So hopefully you feel like you've learned something new. I think that Michael's perspective is interesting on these things. Now, ClubWealth is definitely aimed at real estate agents. So if you are a real estate agent and you are looking at upping your game, I think ClubWealth is a worthwhile option for you to consider. And of course, for everyone out there who's doing real estate, who is serving the needs of buyers, sellers, and investors, never forget that the key is going to be to provide the best possible service, and always understand what that is. Measure yourself by what your clients should measure you by, and keep that other stuff between you and your broker. No one cares or should care about all that other miscellaneous stuff. But becoming a good and successful agent is a perfectly reasonable goal. Just never lose sight of the fact that it's about serving the needs of your clients. All right, folks, thanks again for listening. I hope y'all got some good info out of that. Thanks again for listening. Talk to y'all next time.